Okay. So let's start with the program of this morning. I am Marie-Christine Bonamour. I am the Secretary General of Public Safety Communication Europe, which is a non-profit organization based in Brussels, a forum gathering practitioner, users, industry and research organization. In the Search and Rescue project, we are leading the work on communication and dissemination. And for me, it's a special occasion with this workshop because that is the last webinar of Search and Rescue project. We are coming to an end. And this topic is, of course, very important for crisis management because in most cases, citizens are first responder as well as the community. So we really want to emphasize the work that has been done on the project on this topic. So as you will see, we have different presentation, and the workshop will focus on two main challenges that we want to highlight. So the first one will be how to engage society, and we will have lesson learned also on the sharing of the work done by the ENGAGE project. And the other topic will be also related to the local community. So how to make Europe and society stronger and more resilient. And that will be also the lesson learned from the RESILOC project. So as you can see, we try to elaborate a program that is also sharing the knowledge gain among different projects and create synergy between Search and Rescue project and ENGAGE and RESILOC project so that you can get the best out of it, if I can say this. So after this very short introduction, I am very pleased to give the floor to Laura Indriunet from DG ECHO. So before that, I will just give you two more information. One is that Search and Rescue will have its final conference open to all in May in Lavrio in Greece. It will be a big week of events, in fact, because we'll start with a workshop on standardization. Then we have the conference of Search and Rescue, followed by PSC conference, and we will end with a series workshop as well. So it will be a full week of event on crisis management. The rules of this webinar, so you will get the recording of our session today and all the presentations. You are all muted, and we also ask you to turn off the camera just to be sure that we have a good communication for the webinar. You can, of course, put down your questions, so please write them under the chat. We will check them. And if you have different questions at different time of the webinar, please indicate to whom you address your questions, and we'll handle them if time allows. So at least we'll pick up 1 or 2 questions per speaker. And I think that now we can start with the program. So I am pleased to give the floor to DG ECHO and to Laura. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues, organizers, participants. Just a quick question. Can you please confirm that you can hear me well? Yes, okay.
Yes, sir.
So I can continue. So good morning again. I'm very happy to be invited to this event. A very interesting agenda, I must say, and also I'm actually looking forward to the discussions and presentations and findings from the project, because it looks like there could be a lot of relevant work done that is useful for what we are trying to do here in DG ECHO. So yes, indeed, I represent the Commission, the Directorate General dealing with the civil protection and humanitarian aid. And the purpose of my presentation today is maybe to provide a little bit like a context for your discussions that will follow, a policy context. And I would like to present one of the most recent initiatives, quite recent thing the Commission has adopted, which is the European Union Disaster Resilience Goals. So, but before I start presenting these goals, I would like to touch upon to provide a little bit of background for this initiative. And somebody who's controlling the presentation, could you please move to the next slide? Yeah, so I think we all know pretty well the last years have not been the easiest. And in terms of disasters, we have seen quite a menu of events and challenges striking us in Europe as well. We have seen COVID, we've been seeing really ferocious forest fire seasons, not only in the south, but also in the new places. The earthquakes, the massive flooding hitting Central Europe. Recently, of course, the war in Ukraine, which has repercussions also for the European countries and so on. So lots of challenges. And in this context, there was, maybe a new sense of urgency. We have to do something more on to make sure that we are resilient, because we don't know anymore what might really come our way, and we have to be ready to withstand different types of disasters and events and challenges. So that was a bit the context. Next slide, please. For those who might not be fully aware of the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, so this is the European framework on civil protection. Member states and the Commission cooperate in this framework, and whenever there's a really overwhelming disaster where national capacities are no longer sufficient to deal with it, the country, the European Union member state, but also any country in the world, can request assistance from the Union Civil Protection Mechanism to deal with the disaster. Of course, for example, search and rescue teams is one of the modules that could be sent to a country suffering from a disaster, but also different types of assistance can be mobilized, experts, different response capacities, shelter, and so on. And we can see that in the last years, the different disasters that I have just talked about also had an impact on the union mechanism. Next slide, please. So here we can see very clearly the last 3-4 years, the trend is worrying. Many more requests for assistance. Countries are no longer able to deal with the different things themselves. Mostly, of course, outside. Coming from outside the EU, but also, as you see, 3 times, 10 times more also within the EU. So also affecting member states. So now I come, next slide, please, to this new initiative I would like to talk about, the Union Disaster Resilience Goals. And next slide, please. It is really recent. It was adopted on the 8th of February, less than a month ago. And I'm talking here about the Commission recommendation, which sets out these resilient goals. And there's also a communication which explains a bit the political narrative, why we need those goals. Anybody who is interested, here you can find the references and find those documents online. So a few things to highlight. What are these goals before I present each one of them? So these are non-binding goals. These are like policy objectives that the Commission recommends to think about when we implement different initiatives at national and EU level aimed at disaster risk management. In these goals, there are things that should be recommended both for the Commission, but also, of course, member states, which are the key actors in civil protection, and it's up to them to protect their citizens. It's not for the EU level, of course. it's very important to note that these goals that I will talk about, their scope is limited to the civil protection area, because of course resilience, disaster resilience requires so many components, actions across the different governance levels, different institutions, and actually across the whole society. But the goals that I will be talking about are, okay, what the civil protection can do, what actions they can take to contribute to this more broader resilience to disasters. And the focus, of course, since it's EU-level objectives, is focus on large-scale disasters that affect more than one member state. We are, of course, not thinking here about smaller-scale events that regional level or national level can deal with by themselves. And since our today's the topic is civic engagement and putting citizens at the heart of resilience, I want to highlight that in these goals, inclusivity, attention to vulnerable groups, disabled persons. This is a horizontal principle, meaning that it's an invitation to think about them, whichever goal we're talking about. So now let's move to the goals themselves after all this long introduction. Next slide, please. So an overview. We have 5 resilience goals. And to make sure that they just don't stay goals on paper, we Commission also proposed to launch 5 flagship initiatives to kick off the implementation of these goals, to take some concrete action. And I will briefly run through each of these goals and explain where some of these flagship initiatives. Next slide, please. So the first goal is, of course, before we can do anything, we need to be able to anticipate. So that's the first goal, to understand our risks, to know what's coming our way, current risks and also future risks, and then think about how we can plan for them. So this is the goal 1. This is what we invite member states and ourselves to do. As a flagship initiative, the Commission started preparing EU-wide disaster scenarios, meaning we are thinking of events that could realistically happen in the future that would affect more than one member state. And through thinking about these events, we want to see, are we ready? Are we ready to respond, or can we do anything to prevent them? These are really cross-sectoral work, and it covers different types of hazards. The hazards are listed on the slide, and they range from more natural hazards to cybersecurity and other security risks. This is an ongoing work, should be finished by the end of the year. Next slide, please. Now I come to the goal, which is probably the most relevant in the context of today's event and discussions. It's about population preparedness and risk awareness. So this is, again, a very important goal, and with it we recognize that without resilient citizens, we cannot have disaster resilience. And of course, civil protection authorities also take different actions to make sure the citizens are well aware and warned and prepared for disasters. And here we even have a quantitative target that we want to achieve by 2030, is to make sure that 90% of EU population is well aware of disaster risks in their region. The latest Eurobarometer for 2021 shows that this percentage is much lower. It currently is around 60%. So we still have a lot of work to be done. And here we are thinking about things. Well, we're inviting member states to act on, overall risk awareness, on ensuring public access to information, also promoting different measures that the population can take themselves to be resilient, and overall culture of risk prevention and trust in the civil protection authorities. It's of course a lot of misinformation and mistrust seen in recent years towards public authorities is why this element is here. And of course, under this goal, we have special attention to communicating with vulnerable groups and making sure they are well aware and know how they could protect themselves. So this is the goal, and there's a flagship initiative which accompanies this goal. Next slide, please. And here we are thinking about a pan-European awareness raising program, which could consist of several elements, but they are all, for the moment, still under reflection. For example, like a European week or month of disaster preparedness, possibly European Risk Atlas or disaster risk icons, which are recognizable in all different countries and can be, promoted among schools or tourist places. But to make sure that we are not duplicating what member states are doing and creating really added value with this campaign, first we will start with the feasibility study, which is in preparation. We will be working to see what is happening in different member states, what are the good practices, and where would the EU come in usefully. And to hear, of course, the projects like ENGAGE or RESILOC and your findings will also be very interesting. We should look at them for sure. What are the recommendations and what are the useful actions to be undertaken to reach out to citizens? Next slide, please. The third goal is about early warning system and making sure they are effective and they reach, they provide timely information and they reach everybody who needs to be reached. So this is the focus of this goal. Next slide, please. Goal 4 is about actual response and being, having capacity to respond. And here we are specifically talking about the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, what we should have available at EU level once the member state or another country requests that we are able to come to the rescue. And we know that there are certain gaps. For example, there have been, as I said, ferocious wildfire seasons, and not always assistance was available because so many countries were suffering at the same time. So we already identified areas where we want to boost the capacity to respond to specific risks like wildfires, floods, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear events, even more relevant now in the context of the war in Ukraine. Also health emergencies as an experience with COVID. And here also we have identified certain needs in the search and rescue. So very relevant for this event and project to say that this is also one area where we will be working on. And I have a next slide on that, please. Good. So here there are certain goals also set, a bit more, performance-oriented or quantitative targets that we want to achieve. So we want to be sure that we are able to respond at least 4 member states who need search and rescue capacities. Let's say there's a large-scale disaster and a number of member states are affected and need this assistance. So we want to make sure we can cater for that. We want to have capacities that are that could be used in different environments and different types of disasters. And here we are talking about cave search and rescue and mountain search and rescue, also in the flooding environments. There are certain targets for medium urban search and rescue capacities that we want to have to have the capability to send teams who are working 24 hours for 7 days. And if in case of heavy urban search and rescue for 10 days. So, and also we want to have certain experts accompanying in case there's a volcano eruption, a seismological event, there's a need to assess structural damage or dams. Next slide, please. And the final goal is about actually making sure that our civil protection authorities are resilient themselves, that they don't collapse in a big disaster, that they are functional and can provide the services at all times. And here we're talking about, of course, a lot about business continuity and making sure the plans are in place and exercised. But also other things like cross-sectorial coordination with other authorities. And here we have a volunteer element that volunteers are often involved in response. And so effective cooperation and coordination with them is important. Also other things like communication and information management and lessons learned after. So the whole system is robust and operational in a disaster. And the flagship that we would like to implement here is to stress test interested emergency operational centers in different member states to see, okay, should we have a blackout scenario? Would we be able to cope? Would we remain operational? So that's the plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so you might say, very good, Commission issued a recommendation. So what does it mean for different stakeholders. Of course, the recommendations are a lot addressed to member states and member state civil protection authorities, but not only. As you see, there are a lot of general ideas that could be picked up by different organizations. Risk assessment is important to wherever, whatever governance level you are, whatever type of organization you are, that you know your risks and whether you have a plan in place and so on. So it's an invitation to reflect and see whether these goals could be relevant for you and inspire some upgraded action towards resilience. But also, it's also an invitation to think whether any of the flagships could be relevant for different organizations and join them. For example, very much would invite to consider the EU disaster awareness campaign to be piloted next year. Of course, at the moment, we are still in the phase of conceiving it, but we hope that once we have a better, contours better, that we can start reaching out to different stakeholders to be part of it. And then, of course, there are certain financial tools that are supporting it, and now we are trying to make sure we have support available to different organizations who are willing to implement these goals and contribute to them. So, next slide, please. I will not go in detail through the slide, just to tell you that there's actually a call open, Union Civil Protection and the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. We are financing projects, and all these ideas that I just presented, the goals and the flagships are supported. And we are supporting cross-border projects, so three different countries have to be joining, but it could be any public or private body. And there's a link if somebody's interested. The call is open. These are normally annual calls. So if not this year, next year, it's available. The budget is not as large as Horizon, unfortunately, but there is some financing available. So I will stop here my presentation, and thanks again for having invited me. And if there are any specific questions, I hope I can answer them either now directly, or you feel free to contact me by email.
Thank you, Laura. I will unmute Marie-Christine and Christos.
Thank you, Laura. I was just checking if we have some question, but I think it's very important because we can see a lot of topics that are common also to our activities, and that we hope to contribute to this. Maybe I will have some question about your campaign, EU Disaster Awareness Campaign. Can you give us just a few more information about this? What do you intend to do exactly?
So I don't know, maybe if we could, okay, the slide is closed, so it doesn't matter. So, I mean, to be honest, we just adopted the goals, and these flagships are really, we put forward as ideas. It's not the fully developed thing that we put forward. So now really we are starting to shape them. And for this EU preparedness, population preparedness campaign, we are just having really, we will do a procurement of service providers to do the feasibility study. So really to see, for example, the European, the disaster preparedness week or month. We know member states have these type of events. When are they taking place? How do they look like? Where? What could they be coordinated? So really to do the analysis. Then there's this idea of risk atlas. Should we have something at EU level where you would click through the countries and risks, and you would see, would that make sense to have at EU level? Because of course member states, they have it on different websites, but so we really coordinate. So then there's this idea of these icons, because of course languages differ, and if as a tourist you go, maybe not information is easily accessible to you. But if we create some standardized icons that could be used, would that be useful? But as I said, we don't want to prejudge for the moment
the results.
What will actually be, until we analyze what would make best sense. But in any case, the pilot, we want to have a pilot event, like a campaign taking place across different countries next year. There are certain countries which already expressed interest, like Sweden, who is now holding the presidency and is very interested in this whole of society resilience and population engagement and resilience. So they are really picking up on this topic. Spain, I know, has also indicated they could be interested. So we hope we will find more volunteers when we have more concrete ideas. And then, of course, the idea would be that, it's not the Commission organizing an event. It's really different things happening in the member states, different organizations.
Same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will follow closely then the initiative.
Yes, please check on us every once in a while.
Okay, thank you. So now I will give the floor to Christos Natos from NTUA, who is the coordinator of the Search and Rescue project, and will give us an introduction about the project. Thank you, Christos.
Hello, everyone. Can I get a presentation rights, please?
Yes, sorry about that.
All right. So, hello, everyone. My name is Christos Danos. I am an electronic and computer engineer and the research director for the Decision Support Systems Laboratory of the National Technical University of Athens. And I am the coordinator of the Search and Rescue project, which organizes this webinar, which is hosted by our partner, PSE. I will spend a few minutes to tell you what the project is all about and present you with its current status. The Search and Rescue project refers to the development and deployment of emerging technologies for the early location of entrapped victims under collapsed structures and advanced wearables for risk assessment and first responder safety in search and rescue operations. We will briefly see what that means and what technologies and techniques we refer to in the next few slides. First of all, though, the Search and Rescue Consortium is comprised of 28 partners from 12 European countries, 9 of which are research institutes, 6 are SMEs, 5 are large enterprises, and 9 are end users. The Search and Rescue project, as well as other related initiatives, implements part of the disaster risk and resilience priorities outlined in the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Factors such as climate change, population growth, and urbanization worsen the consequences of life-threatening extreme weather events. Adding to what Laura already mentioned, these events, intensified by climate change, have already caused immense damage in the European Union, with losses exceeding 145 billion euros and in the last decade, and in 2017 alone, amounting to almost 28 billion euros, not to mention the loss of human lives, cultural heritage, and ecosystems. Just in the year 2020, Greece suffered climate-related economic losses of 91 euros per inhabitant. This, of course, does not even account for the insurmountable impact of the loss of human life. Therefore, being prepared is crucial for mitigating and potentially minimizing the effects of both natural and man-made disasters. To achieve this, one essential factor is to equip first responders and rescue teams with advanced tools and specialized equipment. This will help enhance their ability to accurately and quickly locate affected areas, while also reducing the occurrence of false alarms. The Search and Rescue project, funded by the EU under the Horizon 2020 program, began on the 1st of July 2020 and is set to conclude on the 30th of June 2023. The primary goal of Search and Rescue is to establish and promote a comprehensive framework that encompasses system and equipment interoperability, training, and awareness. This will ensure that responders at all command levels can access, familiarize themselves with, and evaluate the deployment of innovative solutions. As research and development continues to produce cutting-edge products in response to ever-growing global threats, the project aims to optimally integrate these solutions as on-demand tools within a holistic governance model. The primary challenge addressed in the connection is the connection of approaches, technical solutions, procedures, and standards for European citizen protection, as outlined in the European Internal Security Strategy. This enables swifter and more effective responses to natural, technological, and man-made threats in EU countries and, if necessary, worldwide. The Search and Rescue project seeks to demonstrate a cohesive crisis governance model supported by the toolbox concept. The model takes into account enhanced civil-military cooperation in technology and operations, as well as public engagement. Emergency responses from various organizations coordinate their efforts in the field, adhering to existing procedures, utilizing diverse training methods, and employing a range of equipment at the local or national level when available. The Search and Rescue project has developed, advanced, and combined a variety of technologies with different adoption levels for search and rescue operations. Some of these technologies have never been tested for this purpose, while others have already seen deployment in field operations. These technologies include the Concord Emergency Management System. This cloud-based platform streamlines crisis management by consolidating incident-related information, triage data, instant messaging, and notifications. It enables seamless communication and information sharing among responders, facilitating quick decision-making and coordination. For wearable and mobile devices, we have various emergency response health condition monitoring devices, including geolocation, strain, ECG, EMG sensors, smartwatches, multi-gas hazmat and radiation sensors, and uniforms. All these help monitor the health and safety of first responders in real time. This allows for better resource management and timely intervention when necessary. We develop smartphone applications, including for volunteers. These apps enable rapid assessment of human resource availability during emergencies, as well as ensuring that volunteer organizations can effectively mobilize and manage their resources to aid in rescue efforts. The e-learning platform, which we will mention also in a little while, the platform offers comprehensive training in safety and security management, along with guidance on using the equipment developed. By enhancing participants' understanding, knowledge, and skills, this tool helps improve the overall effectiveness of first responders in the field. We also developed a specialized first aid device for young victims, which addresses the unique needs of children in emergency situations, improving their chances of survival and recovery. We incorporated robots and autonomous vehicles, equipped with advanced sensors and AI-powered object detection algorithms. These devices can navigate hazardous environments, locate victims, and assist in rescue operations, all while keeping first responders out of harm's way. We integrated drones with object detection capabilities, streaming and recording video, as well as employing AI-based victim localization algorithms. These drones provide aerial surveillance and support for rescue teams. The drone collaboration platform enables seamless coordination and task delegation between different UAVs, increasing the efficiency of search operations. We also developed a 3D mixed reality command center. By visualizing real-time spatial information from various data sources, this command center provides decision makers with a comprehensive situational awareness. It allows them to make informed decisions and coordinate rescue efforts more effectively. Each of these tools plays a crucial role in improving the efficiency, safety, and effectiveness of search and rescue operations. By harnessing these technologies, the Search and Rescue Project aims to create a comprehensive and integrated approach to emergency response, ultimately saving lives and reducing the impact of disasters. At the current stage of the project, the design and theoretical work from the definition phase is complete, as is the implementation and the testing of the Search and Rescue platform, its various components and technologies. Numerous tests and training sessions have been conducted with first responders and equipment operators to ensure the success of the exercises. This process established a continuous feedback loop, enabling technology developers and providers to listen to end users' opinions and make improvements for each subsequent exercise. The schedule for these exercises was carefully planned to provide sufficient time for component owners to develop functional and testable versions of their components, considering factors such as complexity, interoperability requirements, and the need for laboratory testing. Flexibility was crucial for ensuring everyone worked smoothly during the exercises. The project's experiences, feedback, and results are openly shared to promote further development and adoption of the technologies and methods. Now that the exercises are over, the focus has shifted to final tests, analysis, and reporting for the technical aspects of the project. The primary goal now is to formalize our results and maximize the exploitation potential, which is a big challenge in itself. As most of you already probably know, the adoption of innovative technologies, especially by organizations providing critical services, is a very long and thorough process that goes well beyond the time frame of research and innovation projects. This is why we need to seize the day and prepare the ground for our technologies. Technologies, tools, and techniques developed in search and rescue were successfully validated through 7 field exercises based on various use case scenarios. These exercises took place in Italy, Greece, Austria, Germany, France, Romania, and Spain, providing valuable feedback that led to improvements in these technologies. The exercises began in late April 2022 in Sicily, and then June in France, focusing on scenarios involving victims trapped under rubble. In September, a response to a terrorist attack using CBRN materials at an airport was tested in Romania. A cross-border pilot exercise took place in Toll near Vienna, co-organized between Austria and Germany, addressing communication and coordination challenges during a heavy storm that caused a total blackout, loss of communications, and a large gas explosion. In November, 2 exercises were conducted in Greece. The first involved a forest fire scenario threatening an industrial zone, testing safety and remote sensing technologies. The second focused on a mountain rescue of plane crash victims, testing risk assessment, crisis management, and volunteer mobilization technologies. The series of exercises concluded in mid-December in Spain with a CBRN incident involving 2 separate scenarios, a collapsed residential building, and an explosion with an ammonia leak. The Search and Rescue Project has successfully conducted this series of 7 large-scale exercises throughout Europe, showcasing the effectiveness and practicality of the developed technologies in various emergency scenarios. These exercises not only provided valuable feedback for the technology refinement, but also demonstrated the project's commitment to transparency and collaboration. One of the key achievements of the Search and Rescue Project is the creation of an advanced and highly interoperable platform for first responders, which will enable them to respond to emergency situations more effectively. The project also emphasized the importance of adopting a unified vision to the EU's role in emergency response, facilitating better coordination and decision-making. As the Search and Rescue project progressed, we focused on prioritizing components and integrations to ensure timely testing and deployment of selected technologies. This approach enabled the project to expand its scope, benefiting both rescuers and technology providers. These exercises were documented in various formats, producing high-quality dissemination and communication material that has drawn the attention of stakeholders and media alike. Throughout the project's implementation, we ensured that the targeted technology readiness levels were met. By employing pilot management principles such as clear communication, careful planning, and effective delegation of responsibilities, the Search and Rescue Project was able to successfully and efficiently complete this exercise and obtain the necessary feedback. In conclusion, the Search and Rescue Project has made significant strides in the development and the implementation of advanced technologies for emergency response scenarios. The successful completion of the exercise and the strong focus on collaboration and improvement have positioned the Search and Rescue Project for future innovation and potential market adoption of the developed technologies. So now this concludes the overview of the Search and Rescue Project. Normally, the next session would have been presented by Dr. Ioannis Benekos, head of the Laboratory on Risk Management and Resilience at the Hellenic Institute of Transport of the Center of Research and Technology, Hellas. Unfortunately, Dr. Benekos could not attend. Sorry about this. Could not attend, so it will be presented by me. So we are talking about the aspects and of societal aspects of the search and rescue operations, and I will say it on his behalf. The societal aspects of the project are primarily addressed through dedicated work done for social impact of search and rescue. Let's have a quick overview of its structure and major achievements to date. In search and rescue, the work is divided in 5 major activities. First, performing privacy impact assessments, then social and ethical impact assessments. Then we investigate the role of civil society's involvement in crisis management, methods for promoting safety and security of emergency personnel, and finally addressing the involvement of volunteer organizations and citizens. The major expectations of this work and the advancements we hope we are achieving are to first explore the effects of these innovative rescue platforms, like the ones developed and tested in the Search and Rescue Project, on first responders and other societal groups, specifically in terms of personal data, privacy, ethics, and the social implications. Second, it is to enhance safety and security training for first responders by proposing, developing, and testing an e-learning platform to ensure they are well prepared for various emergency situations. And lastly, to strengthen the capacity of civic and volunteer organizations, as well as individuals, for effective and efficient involvement in emergency response efforts. I would finally like to also briefly introduce the two primary applications developed for these purposes: our e-learning platform and the volunteer app. The e-learning platform is a web-based system that offers training courses developed by our project partners who possess extensive experience in search and rescue operations. Its primary objective is to enhance participants' understanding, knowledge, and skills in safety and security management for field operations. The volunteer app, on the other hand, enables volunteer organizations to self-register and create an inventory of individual skills and equipment available for emergency situations. The app not only streamlines the coordination of teams for response or assistance requests, but also provides guidance through messages from a professional command center. With these two applications, we aim to improve both the training and coordination aspects of emergency response efforts. Access to these is open, and you can follow the links you see here to have a look at them yourselves. Thank you for your attention. I'll leave this slide on for just a little bit if you want to copy the links. And that will conclude my presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Christos. I mean, for the presentation, do not worry, because it will be made available afterwards, so all presentation could be accessible to the participants.
I will share it with you again in just a little bit, because I have a few differences from the one that you have yesterday. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll continue the webinar with the presentation of the two challenges, and we have our partner of the search and rescue project, the University of Social Science in Warsaw, who will present these two challenges and what also was discovered on how these topics were managed within the project. So Walid and Cassia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Christine, and thank you to PSCE for organizing this webinar, and thank you for the attendees and presenters for being here. So I'm Walid Serhan. I'm from the University of Social Sciences in Warsaw, and I'm going to be presenting about the advantages and challenges of volunteers in the SNR field. We are part of the SNR project, and our task is the role of civil society involvement in crisis management. And there's been an increasing awareness of the importance of involving civil society in SNR at all stages of crisis management. So that includes how to assess risk and preparedness, and also how to act during a crisis. The more we involve local communities and the more we involve civil societies, the better prepared we are towards disasters, towards response and recovery, and so on. When we talk about civil society in this project specifically, we are looking at volunteers, NGOs, and local communities. The findings that I'm presenting in this presentation are based on on extensive fieldwork, which included 46 semi-structured interviews and 3 focus groups with SNR professionals, volunteers, and local communities. 43 of these interviews were within the EU, 2 were in the Middle East, and 1 was in Australia. When it comes to the focus groups, the 3 focus groups were held with SNR actors within the EU. There was a focus on the relations between professionals and volunteers. So even though this presentation is about the challenges and advantages when it comes to volunteers, we are also looking at from the perspective of professionals and not only volunteers. So before I go into the advantages and challenges, an issue came up in the field work. We interviewed people from many different countries, And there wasn't a common understanding of what is meant by different categories of volunteers. So one thing this research did was to refine these categories into three main categories, which are formal, informal, and spontaneous volunteers. And former volunteers have the same or similar level of training as professional first responders, but they do not have a steady salary for the work they provide. Informal volunteers, on the other hand, are members of the public who are connected to SNR organizations, but their role is focused on relief in terms of distributing food, clothes, medicine, securing shelter, and so on. Finally, there's spontaneous volunteers, and there was confusion here whether they should be called informal volunteers or spontaneous volunteers, but they're more accurately spontaneous volunteers, and they are members of the public who may be individuals or they may be pre-existing groups that appear on the site of the disaster without a prior connection to the SNR organization. So the disaster happens and people just show up wanting to help. And I will talk about the advantages and challenges of each in a minute, but the importance of volunteers concerning the role of civil society is that volunteers tend to be closest to local communities, and they may act as a bridge between professional organizations and local communities. So volunteers are a very important element of civil society because they come from the local communities and they're close to them, and they can act as a bridge with the professional organizations or professional SNR professionals. So moving to the advantages, and I'm going to start first with the formal and informal volunteers, and then I'll get to the spontaneous. So almost all respondents said that formal and informal volunteers have high levels of commitment, enthusiasm, motivation, and energy, and this is really important in the SNR field. They also bring with them expertise. For example, in their private life, they could be a nurse or an engineer or a doctor or even an IT specialist or so on. So they bring in certain expertise that is very useful and necessary in the SNR field. They minimize financial costs in the crisis, in the relief in the response operations and preparedness and so on. When it comes to availability, the respondents were divided here. So some were saying, professionals might just want to work their shift, therefore volunteers are more available. They might appear in random times when we need them. And others were saying volunteers might just not show up, and there's not much that can be done about it because of the fact that they're volunteers. And final advantage, these are the broad categories. Obviously, there's more if we look into it, is that they contribute to emergency plans, especially local emergency plans. They know the local risks and the local assets, and they can contribute to local emergency plans. When it comes to the challenges, there was also almost all respondents said that there's a major challenge with turnover and burnout. Volunteers, of course, we started saying about a lot of them are committed, but there's also an issue of turnover, that some of them end up leaving the SNR field. Some lose motivation and some burn out. It's just too tiring, either physically or psychologically, and they end up leaving the field. So one of the challenges is to keep them motivated to stay in the SNR field. Another challenge is the protocols and procedures. Sometimes there's not enough harmony between the professionals and volunteers in terms of following protocols and procedures as well as understanding them. And that was another main challenge that was mentioned. Availability, like I said, sometimes it's a challenge because volunteers might not show up, and there's not much that can be done about it, even though there could be a contract sometimes, even with volunteers. When it comes to overcoming these challenges, the respondents mentioned that there should be increased joint training on equipment, procedures, and scenarios. The more training we have with volunteers on their own and also volunteers with professionals, the more we can overcome these challenges in terms of procedures and also keeping volunteers motivated and keep them engaged with the SNR field. And a final way to overcome some of these challenges is the standardization of certifications. Volunteers may move from city to city or country to country, and the more the certifications are standardized, the more easily it is them to join the SNR field in different locations. Moving on to spontaneous volunteers, with the formal and informal volunteers, I started with the advantages. And here I'm starting with the challenges, because actually most respondents saw spontaneous volunteers as adding to the chaos of the situation in the disaster because of lack of coordination, and also they sometimes are increasing risk because they don't have the specialized training or they're not exactly sure how to go about this. So on the other hand, there could be advantages, as a few respondents, minority of respondents, saw spontaneous volunteers as additional hands, and also as bringing in creativity. There was an example of carrying a stretcher by 4 people. One could be led by a professional or a volunteer, like formal volunteer, and three other spontaneous volunteers can help with the carrying. That's just one example. In terms of best practices, there was a case in Austria where they started identifying these spontaneous volunteers and including them into the chain of the command. So the next time there's a disaster in disaster-prone areas, there are spontaneous volunteers that have some level of training within the local communities. So that's really it for me. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will pass on to my colleague Kasia Vodnia.
Good morning, everyone. Just one second. Can you see my screen? Local communities involvement in SNR.
Yes, we can
Yes,
see it, but it's
but
not in
it's
full screen.
yeah, it's small.
Is
Okay,
it full screen now?
now it's good. Yes, perfect.
So again, good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Katarzyna Wodniak. I at the University of Social Sciences in Warsaw and at Trinity College Dublin. I will present on our findings on how local communities are involved in search and rescue, and how at the moment we're looking at a process that is largely unilateral, and how we should aim at a two-way process. So at the moment, and all our respondents are involved in this kind of activity. First respondents work quite closely at the local level. So this could be in terms of raising awareness and conducting education activities on risks. There's quite a lot of training provided on first aid. There is work done at the school level with school visits and events. There is an effort to reach out to, say, leaders in the community who can then bridge to individuals or communities that are not otherwise represented. Different sorts of training, and also institutional support for establishment of civil society organizations. This requires communication with local communities, and it's done by posting on websites and social media, so online, through the channels of mostly Facebook and Instagram. Some respondents also mentioned communicating through WhatsApp groups, emails, newsletters, text messages. More recently, I also TikTok, but still Facebook and Instagram were the main ones. Obviously, the traditional media as well, so TV and radio. And most often it's blended communication. So it's a mix of reaching out through training, for example, or events at school and so on, offline, being physically present, and online as well. There is an issue of tapping into local knowledge, and this is where we're getting into the process that at the moment is unilateral, but we should be aiming at bilateral process. So first responders receive information. We were able to put that in two categories in different phases of crisis management. So in the response phase, the use of social media can be useful. So people are posting information on what is happening in the field, and this is often information that that is the most up to date, and from that point of view is useful. But then there is also an issue of reliability. So respondents voiced the concern of fake news and being directed to locations, for example, where things are not happening. So in theory, there is this issue there. So at the moment, only some of the SNR organizations would work with this kind of information during the response phase. Local knowledge could be tapped into during the preparedness and mitigation phases in terms of building awareness of risks, needs, and resources locally. So it is the local people that very often would have the best idea about what the risks are locally. So thinking about how this could be systematized and worked with would be one of the challenges. Then local knowledge could, if there was a systematized way of incorporating it, could be contributing to creation of local emergency plans, especially in risk-prone areas and from past experience. So if there was say a debriefing that included the local communities and the lessons learned were collected, then they could be incorporated into emergency plans. Local knowledge could also serve to increase community resilience. This is already done to some extent. So, for example, there are apps for collecting health data. There's an effort to map the resources where the community could find help. So the value of local knowledge is at the moment widely recognized by both policymakers and practitioners. There's a lot of discussion about this, but then tapping into it, operationalizing it, is actually quite limited. So obviously, what is done in the field by first responders, it's very valuable. Training, empowering, communicating with local communities, but it seems that at the moment it's largely limited to top-down activities. So first responders reaching out to the community with training, for example, or with an event. And there is a need for a more bottom-up approach, more bottom-up initiatives. For this to be done, there is a need for methodologies. So, for example, how to identify local stakeholders and gatekeepers, how to reach out to existing networks, how to make sure that the process is inclusive. So the outreach is not only limited to organized stakeholders, but other members in the community. And this kind of methodologies exist in other fields. So part of an effort to deal with this could be to think about how these other methodologies could be adapted to crisis management. And it would also help to incorporate local knowledge in a systematic way by thinking about crisis management as a polycentric system with many centers where local communities are recognized as a stakeholder and have a chance to be active. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Kasia.
Thank you.
Yes, I just have, I don't know, I'm just checking if there are some questions, but maybe I have one remark, and that could be in line with what has been said by Laura from DG ECO. I think also that gathering good practices of the involvement of local communities in order to see what works and how to empower them also in the field of crisis management could be a first important steps to learn what works well and what are the difficulties at local level. So that could be a combination of applying some methodology and also learning from practices.
I'm not sure who is the next speaker. Is it Stian Antonsen or Jan Worlein? I don't know who I should give the rights, the presenter rights to. So I've sent requests to unmute you both.
So now we move to the topic with management of volunteers, and that will be based on a real use case, so the UTA use cases that we all remember in Norway.
I see that Jan is unmuted, but we cannot hear him. Stian, I've sent you requests, so you should request to unmute. You should accept the request.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, excellent. Sorry, I didn't see the accept unmute button.
No worries.
So now I'm able to share, right? No, can't share.
Wait. Now you should be able to do it.
Excellent. So now I'm hoping that you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can see it. It's just not in full screen yet.
Okay.
Yes.
So now it's in full screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for the opportunity to speak for you. We are proud to be at this webinar, and us being myself, Stian Antonsen from NTNU Social Research, and Jan Worlein, my excellent ENGAGE colleague. ENGAGE is a project with 15 partners in 8 countries. It's coordinated by SINTEF with Mathieu Branlin as the coordinator, the lovely guy on the picture on your screen. And the DNA of ENGAGE is to study the way societies may differ in their basis and resources of resilience. So there are some contextual aspects which influence how you respond to disturbances or crises, and how you can select and implement solutions that makes sense. So it's a very contextual oriented project, and context may be everything from cultural differences to socioeconomic differences, to legislation and your history, the level of religiousness, almost every kind of thing you would use, every kind of word you would use to describe differences between societies, we think matter for societal resilience. So we're going to do 2 things now. After a couple of minutes, my colleague Jan will say a few words about the way we generalize knowledge on societal resilience in ENGAGE, and I will be speaking about a particular case, the Oslo terror attacks from 2011. Like the previous speakers, we are interested in the spontaneous volunteers and their roles for societal resilience. We have chosen this angle for a reason. We did a literature review on the research specifically into the terror attacks, and we found a lot of research on the role of formal preparedness actors, a lot of excellent research on the long-term traumas of victims and next of kin, but we only found 1 article on the spontaneous volunteers for this specific crisis. That being said, the role of spontaneous volunteers, it's not unknown or new, but it's easier to overlook because they are unorganized, and they are the ones that just happen to be there. And we know this from other stories as well. The pictures here, the big one to the left, that's the cover of the formal investigation report on the 22nd of July terror. And here you can see only the formal actors. You have your Delta Force, the SWAT team from the police, and the firefighters first and foremost. The top picture on the right is from the same event. It's on the same location, but the actors are different. These are the active bystanders, not bystanders, but the ones that were there either for work or by some coincidence. And we have seen this before. The picture on the bottom right is from the terror attack to the Bologna train station. I think it's in 1980. And again, you see ordinary people looking for a way to help. Before we proceed, I should say a few words about the case here. We are in and around Oslo in 2011, 22nd of July. It's a Friday afternoon. It's the first day of vacation in Norway, and there are two attacks. One is a bomb explosion. It's a 950 kilogram fertilizer bomb parked outside. It's in a car parked outside the government complex in downtown Oslo. This is where the country's top management, top crisis leadership is located. So the perpetrator set up the bomb. The guy was a right-wing lone terrorist he got in his car and he drove for approximately 1 hour up to Utøya, which is an island, and not any random island. It's the island where the Norwegian Labour Party hold their annual youth camp, which is kind of an institution in the Norwegian political left. So it's a location with high symbolic value. The perpetrator, dressed as a policeman, got on the boat towards the island and went on a shooting spree. He ended up killing 69 people on Utøya, most of them just young kids. 8 people were killed in downtown Oslo. And this was particularly the Utøya shootings. Obviously, there has been shooting episodes before in other parts of the world. We have had school shootings in Finland, which are our neighbors. But still, this was kind of a black swan for us. It was thinkable, but in some ways unimaginable. Those kinds of events just don't happen here in a peaceful corner of the world. But when someone starts shooting at a small island, panic breaks out, obviously. So the instinct, what you want to do, you want to get the hell out of that island. So a lot of kids they ripped off their clothes and they jumped into the lake, which is freezing cold. This is quite high north, and it's very bad weather the same day. So it's a freezing cold lake, and there's quite a distance to swim to reach the shore. And so we have a lot of kids in the lake with a need to be rescued. And due to a series of unfortunate events and misunderstandings, the police, the SWAT team, the Delta Force, they are just not there. And the same goes for the ambulances. There are 79 ambulances waiting in line for the area to be cleared by the police. So for the spontaneous volunteers, they are looking around them, trying to see where's the state, where are the rescuers, and they are basically alone for a long stretch of time. So the first thing they do is the first task, the first coping action that emerges is people rushing to their boats. This is a place where there are not that many inhabitants, not that many live there permanently, but there are a lot of cabins. And where there are cabins in Norway, there are also boats, if they are near a lake at least. But that's only the first emergency preparedness task, the first coping action. If you get injured, panicking kids out of the water, you have to get them on shore. And this is where another preparedness task sort of branches out. People rushing to the site with blankets, clothes, towels, water, or a hand on the shoulder telling you or trying to convince you that you are safe, which is more like a care function, immediate care. This is the point where there are meetings between the formal and the informal apparatus. The person you see on the picture, the bottom picture, was the one transporting the Delta Force over to the island. And that's a crucial meeting where the Delta Force has the ability to tap into the local knowledge, the situation awareness. They can ask, do you know where the shooter is? Do you know your way around the island? Where should we land to have the best possible approach? But still, if you're able to take care of victims on the shore side, they can't stay there forever. You want to transport them to a safe location, which means that you need both transport and a safe location. And the safe location becomes a conference center called Sundvolden, which is, I don't know, it's like 10 or 12 kilometers away from the shore side at Utøya. And the important and interesting part is that this is a very sort of coherent chain of coping actions which branches out without formal responsibility, without organization, or without leadership. There are some people. We have done a series of interviews with people involved with these different tasks. There are some people experiencing that they have tried to take leadership, but none of the others have experienced being led by someone. So basically, this is emerging, but they are not necessarily an emergent group, which we find in the literature. They are basically unknown to each other. They keep doing their atomistic task, and the handovers, they more or less present themselves. Now it's easy to label these as coping actions once we know the outcome. We know the consequence, and the consequence was good, so we can label them coping actions. But what if the result could easily been very different? What if all these helpers had been killed? And I think this tells us something really important about resilience, that you don't really know what turns out to be positive or resilient. You need to judge it on intentions more than outcomes. And also, I'm a sociologist by background, and this kind of research, being so privileged that you can ask people exposing themselves to extreme danger, being shot at, being able to ask them what goes through your mind when you push your boat into this water. That's, I think it's a very underestimated field of research. It does not only tell you about crisis response, it tells you something about society, it tells you something about humanity, and I think it's a really, really important line of research. We have grouped these, we have just finished the report on this. We have grouped the very specific coping actions along this chain of preparedness tasks. But in my introduction, I emphasized that we, in ENGAGE, we are very much interested in context. And for these specific coping actions, we see a lot of capabilities and resources in use, where the formal actors, they were sort of playing away from home. They did not know the area, but the people there did. They knew the geography, and they knew people around, and they could use networks for mobilizing resources. And resources here, it's gasoline to keep driving your boat. It's towels to keep drying the kids, clothes, cars, everything you need to keep doing what you have started doing. And around that, again, this is like this, the first one was the immediate context. But at a higher level of abstraction, a higher level of analysis, you start asking, well, what characterizes the more lasting societal structures? Does it mean something that Norway is usually characterized by having a low power distance, that you have a lot of autonomy? You, if you intervene and try your best, you can probably count on not being subject to litigation. Same goes with a low level of social inequality. People are quite similar to each other. So you can recognize yourself, anyone else, as a victim, and you will hope, and you could probably count on that someone will do something if you are the victim, which points to a generalized trust. So the interesting part here is that these sort of explanatory variables, they are on a whole different ballgame compared to what is often described as resilience, which tends to be more focused on organizations than societies. And with that, I think I will leave the floor to Jan. Jan, you can either take control, or you can just ask me to click, whatever you prefer.
Yes, so I think I received an email from Jan. Okay. Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I just take over from Stian. Thank you, Stian, for the beginning of this presentation. So what we did from this UTIA case study, which Stian just presented, is we wanted to go further and try to develop an approach that takes this societal element into account. And what we did is we compared this initial UTIA case studies to other case studies. First, one which is quite similar in terms of size, so it's on a local level in somehow closed environment, and it's a similar type of disaster, was we compared it to the Thales failed terrorist train attack in 2005 on a train between Brussels and Paris. And we tried to see if what we see in this case study on how, well, informal actors, let's not call them volunteers because there's not always an intention behind it, how these informal actors reacted was quite similar in the way we could see during the UTIA case study, which was also about atomistic tasks. So not necessarily coordinated, independent from each other, kind of a tunnel vision, trying to prevent a terrorist to shoot in a train. And then we went a little bit farther and compared it to two other case studies, which are quite different in size. The 2018 wildfires in Sweden, where we had the biggest wildfires after the Second World War in Sweden. And we looked at rural communities and how, well, again, informal actors operated with first responders, with emergency organizations, but often also in parallel and independently. And we took another case study, more or less on the same level, so let's say regional level. We also looked at the Aquila earthquake in 2009 in Italy, and again had the same impression that those organizations emerge at the beginning independently from official disaster management, and then, of course, over time are being institutionalized, often in reconfiguration of existing social networks that existed beforehand. And finally, in the last step, we compared it to disasters which are on a really completely other scale, but where we have a lot of literature and a lot of examples of how volunteers and informal actors do things after major catastrophes. So the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident in 2011, linked, of course, the great tsunami, the great East Japan tsunami of 2011, and of course, because we have a lot of literature now, the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. So you can see those are cases on different levels, and the idea was not to make an intense case study and compare each one of them to each other, but to look at the examples. How did ordinary people act in those cases, and what does this tell us about resilience? Next slide, please. And the idea was to look at 4 different elements to try to find a common definition of societal, what we call societal resilience, in all those cases, to understand what people actually do. So talking about their actions, what we call coping actions, because it's not only intended to be volunteers, but often it's just coping with adapting to the adverse event, trying to survive, and by that trying to cooperate as well and being engaged in those types of disasters. And we've tried to understand how the context played in those cases, how it enabled people to do that, what they did. Next slide, please. So the idea was to go from that to a common definition and common approach to societal resilience in order to find also solutions, how to increase and enhance societal resilience by increasing interactions between authorities, emergency organizations, and those informal actors, those ordinary people who do things often in parallel and not connected so far. So we try to find a definition that points towards the potential. So what people do is the potential to overcome the disaster. Next slide, please. I will not go into the detail of this model, but what is important here again is that we have those atomistic tasks, as Stian mentioned. So people doing things independently and not connected to what the official disaster management does. And we try to enhance those connections by being very well aware of what the social context is. So what does enable them, be it the local environment, be it some skills they had beforehand, and describe precisely how this happens in order to find solutions to enhance it. Next slide, please. And from that approach, we have some very basic takeaways, which are, I think, good lessons from those different case studies. And they really point to the fact that often what informal actors do, what ordinary people do, is not necessarily visible for emergency organizations and authorities, and especially the result of what they're doing is not really visible. So it's important to recognize their presence and their agency. They should always be addressed and always should be integrated. So going away of this notion of bystander, of people just standing around doing nothing, there might be things happening behind the scenes that we do not see. And our case studies show that often there are dynamics, there are networks branching out, as we call it, that are not visible and even not visible on the long term for emergency organization authorities. So they should always be addressed and, if possible, giving a role. They should also receive resources, even if we don't see the turnout of it. So we should give them material and knowledge to do what they do, even though we do not always know what is the turnout. Because often we will not even see the turnout, it will be visible from a distance and on the long run. And finally, the resources should be assessed, so we should try to make it visible what is done in a way, for example, anticipate. Often we have now integrated in a lot of official disaster management plans, special groups that try to anticipate what can happen over time while the operations are underway. And those groups could assess systematically protocols and by formal approaches, what are the informal actors on site and what are their resources. So this is the basic takeaway from our approach so far. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot. So if I understand correctly, your last point, you mean that in the protocol that disaster manager are using, you would suggest that they integrate the dimension of the societal resources and in order to integrate this, because that was a remark previously in one presentation that sometimes it is so chaotic that involving spontaneous volunteers could be very difficult for the first responder and could add to the chaos of the situation. So you would recommend to have a pre-preparation to adapt and take into consideration these additional resources and this new dimension in the protocols.
Yes, the argument would be why the rescue operations are in place, to try to systematically assess what is happening besides the rescue operation. So what we could see in our case study is that in every single case, things were happening, things were successfully happening that first responders just did not see. Also because, and this would be the argument, because it was not systematic, we were not systematically looking for it. And so if it would be possible to integrate this in protocols, to try to systematically assess what the others are doing, we would profit in terms of resources for first responders, but we could also enable those actors to continue doing what they're doing in any case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, thank you. Now we can move to the next presentation. It's the local community dimension. So I would like to give the floor to Daniele and Nikolai from the RESILOC project.
Good morning, everybody. This is Ramona Vela from the RESILOC project, Institute of International Sociology of Gorizia. Just a slight change of program. My colleague Daniele Del Bianco will not be able to join us this morning, so I will take over the contribution for the RESILOC session. I will be joined in this by my colleague Nikolai Todorov from the Bulgarian Red Cross. I would just kindly ask for the possibility to share the screen, because we also prepared a couple of slides, a bit more than a couple, but we'll try to keep them as brief as possible. Let's see if now, okay. And I believe, hopefully this works. I am putting now the
yes, we can see it in full screen.
Is this okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting us, for inviting RESILOC project. As you might know, RESILOC project has recently closed, so we are fresh with, how to put it, some insights, lessons learned, maybe suggestions and fruitful insights for debates, we hope. We have with us today, if I'm not mistaken, also our coordinator, Mr. Karsten Uhing from Fraunhofer. So we would also like to thank him for being here, and of course, congratulate our colleagues from CNR project for the amazing work, and all the other contributors of the morning. So within this 20, maximum 30 minutes that we have at our disposal, we would like to share with you a couple of insights from what we learned in terms of community resilience assessment tools, but also building resilience strategies at local level. Just very quick insights from on the RESILOC framework. And then we would like to focus for sure on two specific case studies of the project, two pilots of the project that brought about the engagement of citizens in co-production processes dedicated to the elaboration of local resilience strategies. These case studies are Gorizia municipality in Italy, which is here where I am, and also the Tetovo village in Bulgaria, which will be presented by my colleague Nikolai from Bulgarian Red Cross. So very quickly on RESILOC, it's not my usual pitch because this would fall usually on the shoulders of our coordinator, but I would like to just very quickly introduce to you the project for those of you who are not already familiar with it. So RESILOC started as a journey way before it was financed and kicked off as a project in 2019. We would say 2018, maybe with brainstorming in between 15 partners across 7 countries on the issues on disaster resilience. Of course, the landscape of risk at that time was already giving signals of the increasingly, how to put it, increased exposure to unexpected events, which would increase complexity in turn to the local level. From the kickoff meeting of the project until today, I believe our worries, concerns, and willingness to work on these topics demonstrated, unfortunately, valid enough, because we know that complexity increased even more so in the past 3-4 years. We were working back then, and we believe, listening also to the presentation of this morning of DG ECHO on the Union disaster resilience goals, that our hypotheses or research questions are still valid, and we only hope that with our project we will contribute a bit further to this. To this what? Well, we believe that we are seeing a shift of paradigm, not only at European level, maybe also beyond, from a risk-focused perspective to a more resilience thinking perspective. This is demonstrated, of course, by the Sendai framework, by many efforts, and finally, from February, with the Union disaster resilience goals. Our question in this shift of paradigm was, what are the implications for the local level? How can we support further the local level? So basically, this would be a bit of a visualization of the RESILOC project journey, let's put it like this, the framework. I won't go into details. There are many components that make up the RESILOC framework, but today we would like to focus mostly on the citizens and community engagement in what? The process of resilience assessment that RESILOC set up for. Resilience assessment done starting from identified scenarios of interest at local level, because community level was the focus of our project. Based on these scenarios, the identification of relevant indicators and proxies that would support first a data collection, second an assessment, and a whole process that is still, because it is still ongoing, there are follow-ups to this project, is mainstreamed by co-production and involvement of stakeholders at local level. The idea was to support the analysis, the assessment of resilience, and we will depict in a next slide the view of resilience of the RESILOC project, and try to do so in order to promote the elaboration of context-based resilience strategies, so to support decision makers at local level. RESILOC inventory is basically the way that the way in which RESILOC sees community resilience. It's a very common approach to simplify a bit the complexity of resilience and of local communities by means of dimension and specific indicators and proxies. This is how we looked at resilience. This is the way in which we structured information. This is the way in which we collected data. This is the way in which we then visualized the results of this analyzed data. But even more so, this is the way by means of which we managed to talk with local stakeholders about resilience in 4 different pilots that we are going to present. Local stakeholders were involved since the beginning of our project, and users. The term we are using here is the local resilience team. This was a bit the ambition, and it was actually an output and an outcome of our project, setting up this local resilience partnership, representative of a community, representative of its structure, but even more so on the expertise and the knowledge that is present in a local community. We set up this local resilience team, and their story will be a bit the focus of our presentation. The idea was to, with this project, was that of localizing as much as possible the resilience assessment and try to counteract a bit the tendency of going top down, but instead trying to promote a bottom up and also support capacity building at local level in order to allow for this resilience assessment to be actually efficient. We did this by involving a group of selected stakeholders. We are going to talk about that in all the phases of the project and of development of the different technologies, that implying for sure the identification of a scenario, identification of proxies and indicators, collecting the data, assessing the data, and then trying to interpret that data into a set of strategic objectives that would compose the local resilience strategies. This is, I hope, in very quick, in very briefly, the introduction to the RESILOC project. These are the pilots in which all of this was applied. We are now going to focus, as we said, on 2 of the pilots, Gorizia municipality in Italy and Tetovo village in Bulgaria. So very quickly on engaging citizens in resilience building in our project. And I will start in an unconventional way, maybe this part of our presentation by linking with what our colleagues from the University of Social Sciences in Warsaw presented just half an hour ago this morning. Why did we wanted to stimulate participatory approaches in building this resilience strategy, in assessing resilience at local level? And I believe our colleagues had quite a good starting point there, and we hope that they will see reflected their ideas and hopefully also some answers to some of the questions they have posed. Because indeed, we also wanted to integrate, and as we acknowledge as all the practitioners and scientific community and policymaker, the fundamental importance of local knowledge when it comes to resilience assessment, but also in trying to build preparedness and resilience strategies which have a meaning at local level. So that was the first why. Why do we want to go participatory? First of all, to integrate the knowledge, to make sure that we are not losing anything if we look from our scientific ivory tower. We wanted to consider the effective, the actual local needs and capacities at local level, so to be able to activate some of the resources. And I could see this reflected also in the ENGAGE colleagues from the ENGAGE project. Disaster management managers, but also all the actors involved in the disaster management cycle should be aware maybe and should be supported to go and search for those existing resources at local level. But in order for that to happen, there is a need for a structured way. And hopefully with RESILOC, and even more so with the, let's say, the format of the local resilience team, we managed to support. Ultimately, we wanted to make sure that whatever was produced and co-produced within this project would make sense for the involved communities. Now, participatory approaches to resilience, how did we went about that? How we usually do it? Us at ISIG, for instance, we are involved in this kind of activities, and we are supporting the Council of Europe in promoting participatory approaches and to decision making at very different levels. So we try to bring this approach also in the RESILOC project. We first had an eye on selecting actors by proposing a structured approach towards stakeholder mapping at local level in each of the pilots in order to understand who were the main actors to involve within these local resilience teams. We set up personalized, if you want, engagement strategies that would target, yes, the local resilience teams, which were the main component of our co-production and participatory effort at local level, but then we looked also at the broader community, and you'll see in just a few slides how we managed to reach that. So the idea was to personalize for each pilot the engagement strategies with an eye on the technical, let's put it like this, partners that would support, which are these local resilience teams, the closest partnership, but then also try to engage the entire community. We established the local resilience teams, and what we did there, and I believe this was of crucial importance also for the success or anyhow the advancement of our project, was that of strengthening capacities of the persons and the actors that were involved in this informal partnership, which is the local resilience team. So it wasn't only about raising awareness generally and communicating risk, but actually working with them and trying to support their ownership of the proposed methodologies of the project, that is of looking at resilience and trying to assess it in order to make sense of what would be next measures to propose to the decision maker in terms of resilience building. Local resilience teams, informal partnerships, as we were saying, they were seen as multipliers of the project at local level, but also, if you want, partners in crime of the project within the communities, because they supported, especially in the case of Gorizia and Tetovo, very closely so the work of the assessment of resilience and the strategy building later on. There is a method of, we mentioned it already, of stakeholder mapping. We won't go into detail, but just for you to know, the way these groups were formed, they were following specific criteria and methodologies, which kind of answer a bit the call that was made by our colleagues from the Warsaw Social Sciences University, if I'm not mistaken. We co-produced and validated, that was a bit the fil rouge of our project. Let's say for further references, we don't have the time now to go into the details. The project also listed a couple, actually 5, not a couple, of policy recommendations that complement a bit the Union disaster goal. We are not pretentious, but just to say that we believe they come together very well, and also within this, by enunciating this recommendation, in the work of the recommendation, we included not only end users from the project, but also policymakers from different contexts, including European level. There is a specific recommendation and also a way on how to, a suggestion on how to make it feasible at local level, which evolves around the participation. So that is definitely one of the recommendations of our project, to promote civic engagement in resilience assessment, but also in enhancement of resilience at local level. The idea here would be transforming the role of citizens when facing hazards from potential victims to actually very active actors in preventing that to happen. The case of Gorizia, I don't want to steal any more minutes from my colleague, because Tetovo is as well a very interesting case study. Gorizia local resilience team. So Gorizia, first of all, is it's a border community situated in the north of Italy on the border with Slovenia. Our local resilience team had a total of 15 members, which represented very different aspects from our community. There was a core team, as I was mentioning earlier, that supported the process of resilience assessment throughout the 2 years of project implementation. And then there was a wider audience that was involved periodically with specific engagement activities. Just like all the pilots in RESILOC project, we tried out all the technologies, methodologies that were produced by the project. So these are just some numbers that will be shared with you, just for you to know the work implied many workshops, and especially in very structured moments. You will see this also very well articulated colleagues' presentation from the Bulgarian case study. Just to say maybe one of the highlights, just 2 minutes and I will close. Highlights of the Gorizia, if you want, case study are definitely the fact that we managed to stimulate at the end of the production process of the strategic objectives would compose the strategy of resilience of the community. We put this to the attention of 2 sessions of citizens' jury. So it was open to the entire community of Gorizia, more than 150 citizens. Gorizia is a relatively small, medium, so that is quite a number. More than 150 citizens voted for the strategic objectives of resilience, which were reflected then in a local resilience strategy, which was officially adopted by the city council. So this document is more or less binding for local communities insofar as from now and the next programming period of the municipality, this kind of objective should be reflected or considered whenever the municipality is going to issue local policies documents. So we believe this to be quite an achievement, an example for Italy, if you want. So everything is available online, as well as methodology by means of which we put together the local resilience teams is available in a short e-learning program that we can circulate later on in the minutes of the meeting. With no further ado, I will pass the floor to my colleague Nikolai Todorov for Bulgarian Red Cross, and I will continue to share the slides for him, if that is okay.
Nikolai, I just sent you a request to unmute. You have to accept it.
I believe he's asking for you to.
Yes, I'm sending.
Thank you.
I hope you hear now.
Okay,
Yes.
that's good.
Okay.
Hello there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ramona. I hope you're going to change my slides.
Yes.
So, to start with our case in Bulgaria, it was, let's say, a little bit very interesting when compared to the European size of the project. You can see that beside of Tetvo, there is something else, Demogili. Later on, I will explain what this Demogili means and why we add additional community to our trials. So in the beginning, we choose Tetovo village as a proper place to do our trials. Why? Because it is not very strange, but very typical for Bulgaria village. It is 45 minutes away from the Ruse, which is a municipal center. It is close to the border with Romania, Danube River. And they have no doctors, they have no firefighters, they have no police. They completely depend on their own. Even they lost their old school because the firefighters arrived 2 hours after giving the signal to 112. So those people are very dependent on themselves. And in the beginning, it was a little bit strange for us as living in the big cities. Then we realized that it's a big plus for them. Simply, they're doing everything by themselves. Even for the small fires, They don't need any support from outside. If they need the ambulance, usually the mayor takes its own car and getting people to the hospital. When somebody is going to the big city, they're asking, do somebody need some medicine or some products or something like that? And they're buying for the others. So it is a very strange small community where the people are very linked to each other. So once we started the project, we started to compose the LRT, and later on I'll tell you what mistakes we make in the beginning. Then, of course, our idea was to trial everything we did, not only in Bulgaria, but also by our scientific partners. And then, of course, what is going to be the result for the community if you have just some proved scientific tool that works and says, okay, guys, here you have some mistakes in your resilience. You must do something, but what? So in the end, we created some recommendations from the local resilience strategies, not only recommendations to the project. Could you give me next slide, please?
Yes.
So this is the Tetovo. It is a small village. It is about 1,700 people living in Tetovo. And once we are speaking about the evaluation of resilience of some community, it is not possible simply because resilience to what? To volcano? Volcano is not existing in Bulgaria. Or, for example, to some kind of Daiichi in Fukushima? Probably not very probable. So we asked local people, what are the most typical disaster they have, if possible repeatable, in order just to take closer to them the old methodology and somehow to assess their resilience to this disaster. So the local people choose that, okay, it is very common to have some forest fires, wildfires. In fact, they appears almost every week in the months of August and September. And something very typical for this village is the harsh winter conditions. It is not the cold wave, as it is used to be said in big documents. It is really harsh winter conditions because their appendix, their end of the road, and the road to their village is probably the last thing which are cleaned from the snow by the municipality. So it is very usual each year to have between 2 or 3 days, till to 10 days, they're cut from the civilization, if I can say. So it was very typical for them, these harsh winter conditions. So those are two scenarios we developed together with the community of Tetovo. Next, please. The second community is Demogiri. It is not that big difference between number of people who are living there. But Demogiri is already a city and it is a municipality center. It means that they have firefighters, they have some doctors there, they have police. So they have all community services that are supposed to be helping people in disaster. Speaking with the people, they choose again two scenarios. One of them is wildfires, okay, the same region approximately. So the firefighters and the wildfires, they're something common. But the second scenario they choose in the beginning really surprises us. They want to ask, do I want to speak and to develop the scenario of terrorism? Why? Then we realized, speaking with them, that it is not that much terrorism, than the fake news that could have some unpredictable results to the life of the community. And in reality, this fake news scenario gives us a very interesting results when regards to the assessments of the community and their resilience. Next, please. So, how we started? Of course, in the beginning, we have the concept how to create and how to use the LRT. We collect some people. We started to speak with them, but later on we will see the mistakes we made. Of course, why we need this LRT? In the beginning, in order to understand our communities, we should make some community profiles. And to assess the resilience, we need these scenarios. And what we use all the resilience and inventory created by the RESILOC. We have a very interesting app, but we very soon realized that without special training, it's impossible to be used by just people. Okay, guys, here you have the access to the app. Unfortunately, it is not going to work like that. Then we realized that it is okay to have scenarios, but on what indicators you are supposed to assess the resilience? We have, of course, created under the project some a little bit more than 300 possible indicators, proxies. But in fact, how to use them? What it is mean? What does it mean in the context of some community? So we need plenty of work, and we need to reshape the people who are in the LRTs in order to have deeper understanding and to work together. Okay, it's not for me. And to work together with the community in order to achieve some results that will lead to the to better resilience of the community, and of course to the raising awareness of all community regarding different type of disasters. Of course, in the end, we have this recommendation to the resilience strategies, and everything in the end was put to the citizens jury. In case we ask them, okay, we did something perfect in our point of view. Do you approve it? Because it is not that important from our point of view that we created very nice project that the Brussels will be happy with this. We are working for the community. And if the community understands what we did, and if they're happy with the results, it means that they're going to replicate the results and to use our recommendations. So next, please. So how we started? We started somewhere in the end of the 2020 with the LRT, with the understanding that this LRT is going to be support as first responders to the official authorities and to the people in the community. Unfortunately, it was not a fact, because the idea is not to give a hand as a first responders, but to assess the resilience and to raise the awareness. So somewhere in 2022, in the early 2022, in the beginning of January, we created a core LRT created from the people from municipality, but also from the people from the University of Ruse, which is the municipal center, people from the firefighters, people from police, people who are skilled in managing volunteers in disaster and working with the spontaneous volunteers. Together with these people, we work on the scenarios, we work on the assessment of the resilience of the community. So we reach in the end the results, but those results are, let's say, the vision of the LRT and part of the people who are working on the project. So is it that important for the people? We don't know. So you can see on the pictures, picture up with the big table, it is in Dlemugili. People there are voted for each one of our recommendations. Is it worth for them or not? The same is downstairs, these people with uniforms in the blue t-shirts. It is, they are the people from the village of Tetul. What was the interesting as a result between approximately the same size areas? One of them is 1,700, the other one is 2,500. We realized that in the end, the people from the small village, which have no other support from the government or very distant support from the government, they're very much dependable on themselves. They have better understanding of resilience. They're much more aware of the disasters. The people from the city, which is okay, not that not that much better, bigger, sorry, from Tetovo, those people, they rely on the government. They say, okay, we don't care. We have firefighters. We have ambulances around. Somebody will take care about us. So it was very, very important to understand that the community, doesn't matter of its size, has their own understanding and their own attitude to resilience and to the awareness. And it was the most important result, I believe, in Bulgaria, because approximately the same size, approximately the same region, completely different results when coming to attitude of the community to the resilience. So this was the interesting thing why we took the second community. And okay, thank you. Give me the second one. The second slide. Next. Okay, thank you. How we started with the LRT in Tetovo. We have 14 people, workers and technicians, who are really volunteers and who are really working when it comes to disaster. Real first responders, volunteers. We have management, of course. Where to go without the managers? Village mayor, the bosses, the owners of two biggest companies in the village, because the village is very much dependent on the heavy machinery they're providing in case of a disaster. Of course, we have people from the cultural institution, one of the three NGOs working in Tetovo. One is the Bulgarian Red Cross, the second is cultural institution, the third one is some kind of management body in the school, made from the parents of the people there. We have some people from the administration and finances. You can see that all of them are interested, okay, majority of them are interested in emergency management and disaster risk reduction. All these people really help in the disasters. But in the end, it comes that it is very important to know where to focus the efforts of community in order to improve their resilience and to make better understanding of disasters and all around the issues connected to this. So in the end, although the Bulgarian firefighters, it is a civil protection authority, are not part of this project. In the yearly report in Rusa region, they reported that the project RESILOC was of big importance, or the biggest importance, in the last 2 years when it comes to raising awareness in the region. So I think that working with the small communities, we reached the big result of the project in order to raise the awareness and to give some instruments how to, if not calculate, at least to assess it and to make a recommendation to the awareness strategies in the region. So thank you very much. If you have some questions, I'm here.
Nikolai.
Thank you, Nikolai.
Yes, thank you very much for this true presentation on the project, because we can see really that working very closely with the community is a factor of success, and that you get a lot of the citizen and that they really want to participate. And this is the value of financing the resilience of their community. So it's a winning situation, I would say. So thank you for sharing this. I'm just, yeah, I see that Laura from the Commission had to disconnect. We will share with her, of course, the presentation, because that would be very helpful also for the work they are doing in DG ECHO. I see that Walid and Cassia, they raise their hand. Maybe they have a question, so please.
Yes, I have sent a request.
Hi. So we just wanted to thank you for the presentations. It was really interesting to see what else is happening in this field. And like you said, some of the issues that came up in our interviews to some extent are now answered by the results of your project. So I would be very interested in reading more about this. And yeah, I think a few really interesting points came up. So one of them was, for example, to recognize the effort that is already done in the field by the local community. See it in terms of this polycentric system where community is the actor. Then collecting all these tools, instruments, and methodologies that you observed and we observed, and kind of think in terms of a library of solutions, and also placing all this in a larger sociological context. We're also sociologists. Yeah, very interesting, and thanks a lot for this, and I think we can take it further as well.
Thank you very much. And we are here and very, very willing to further discuss on this for sure.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm Walid. So I would just like to add to Jan's presentation about the spontaneous volunteers that, the more use could be made of spontaneous volunteers, because in a way they're also a source of local knowledge. They know the area, they might know what the risks are, even if they're not trained but from our interviews, the majority said that they might lead to more chaos or increased risk, but there were a minority who were agreeing with Jan that they could be a source of a strength in search and rescue. They could be integrated either prior, so identify these people and give them some form of training in disaster-prone areas, or during the disaster or crisis, which is I think what Jan was focusing about. And there were a couple of cases where, like I said, they were asked to carry stretchers instead of using up formal volunteers and professionals to carry stretchers. Maybe ask some of the spontaneous volunteers, and also the first presentation about the terrorist attack in Norway. When the boat arrived, they knew the local area. So there are ways of making use of that as well.
And when I was listening, I also thought that maybe the approach needs to change to some extent. So instead of trying to manage the spontaneous volunteers, maybe we could let people organize themselves and kind of have a structure within a structure, and try to think about ways of strengthening this, seeing this as a way to increase the resilience. Very interesting. It was really great to hear your presentations.
Well, thank you all for this. I'm just checking if there are some more questions or remarks from the audience, or for the first responder that we have with us. I do not see any. I'm just checking. Yeah. So really, I would like to thank you all. I think it's really great to create these synergies among the project, because we are all working around some of the same topics, and sharing the finding of the project is very important to move forward. So thank you all very, very much. And keep in touch also with Search and Rescue. We have a final event in May in Lavrio, so everybody is welcome to attend this event, and we will circulate information about it. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye to all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
so
everyone,
much.
for joining.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.